Okay, here we are, day 2 at DevOps Day. I'm sitting here with Michael Cote. Cote, how are you today?
I'm wonderful.
So you gave a talk yesterday on innovation and the fact that it actually can occur at big companies.
That's right.
So, and as a proof point, you used Crowbar. So you can tell us basically what your thesis was?
Well, first, I like that you've up-leveled it to as if I was proving some general theorem. So I appreciate that. I think the basic premise was, given my sort of informal hobbyist study of the phenomena of big companies actually doing innovative, interesting things, and by actually, I don't mean to be dismissive. It's just the way that I'm couching it. It was fun to come to Dell, and there's this Crowbar project that we have that in a very short amount of time has reached what I would consider a pretty high level of success when it comes to being weighted by community acceptance, actually being shipping product, if you will, and something that our company is supportive of and is enjoying. And so since I came to Dell in August, when we did a video way back then, I've had a trim since then. If people want to do a side-by-side. I've had the chance to talk with a lot of the Crowbar people and kind of observe it in action. So I wanted to pull some of the principles of what they were doing to be successful into basically a little presentation. So there were, I don't know, 7 or 10, I forget how many there were, different things. And a lot of them really, for when you're starting a project, your main concern is actually just getting code out the door and getting features out the door and getting feedback from customers and users to help you guide what you're doing. Because it is, if you're working in a new, that is innovative space, you're not really ever sure exactly what you're doing. You know the problems that you're solving, but you're always trying to come up with the way that you're solving them, so you want to get a lot of feedback. It's not like, to use one of our friends' favorite anti-innovation things, which I think is just funny, it's not like you're just putting another blade on the razor. You kind of have to understand how it is you're going to trim those beard hairs in the first place and come up with different variations. So I expect in the razor blade industry, there was a lot of give and take and feedback before they settled on we're up to 10 blades now, right?
11.
And a battery.
Yeah.
But, there were some other aspects that were interesting, having sort of establishing relationships and being able to talk with people like the guy, John Igo, who manages that group. It was fun to talk with him for about an hour and kind of get his take on some of the things that were successful, because a lot of the information you get on the public web is about how startups are successful and how you're successful at smaller companies, but there's very little I find about being successful at big companies. So talking to the manager of that group, if you will, it was interesting to see how he managed fitting into a larger group. And one of the things that might be kind of counterintuitive but helpful is this notion of there's a couple things. One of them is making sure that you kind of hide out in the organization, and that is, that's kind of a snarky way of putting it, but really what it means is that you carve out the time, and basically the time needed within a large company to actually work on your product. Because there's always company picnics to go to and performance reviews to fill out and all sorts of things you could be doing instead of actually coding. And another part of that I'm very quickly trying to remember as I talk here is, I should have printed out my talking points, but another interesting part is you want to make sure to cut yourself off from talking about yourself or from educating the rest of the organization, because especially in a large organization, there's always going to be people, if you're working on something new and interesting, who want you to come give them a readout or like have a meeting and present to you in like some day-long form about how you fit into the world and everything. And at some point, people like myself, as is obvious, sort of enjoy hearing themselves talk. So it's kind of it's kind of fun if someone asks you to come talk about stuff you're working on. But you have to be kind of responsible and say, like, I could be working on getting the product out the door and working on the product, or I could be working on telling people about the product internally. And you just sort of have to stop yourself at some point from over-educating. And again, I think the dynamics of these things, well, maybe not again, but in my mind, I've thought this many times, the dynamics change as the product gets older, because you're not necessarily, when a product is sort of over the hump and you're just sort of milking the market, if you will, instead of trying to create the market or service a new market or discover what that market is. Once a product gets older, a lot of these notions that I go over start to change, where, for example, it starts to become a lot more important to deliver on schedule and to deliver on time and to be predictable and stable, because you have hundreds, hopefully thousands of people depending on your software and building their own plans around it. And so it's actually disruptive if you do something that when you're a younger product is actually handy to do, to say, in the words of that manager, John Igo, like, you know, I'll walk around the hallway and if someone tells me we can wait another week to release and we'll get one more feature, well, of course I'm going to wait another week. Because when you're a young product, as I was saying, it's better to be awesome, right? It's better to have real high quality and good features. And, you know, being late or on time to the party, not really that big of a deal. Now, there's exceptions, of course. But, you know, that's just a couple of the items that I was going over in that presentation.
I think that's one of the interesting things with large companies is when to hide out from the process that can kill a small project like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree with too many ornaments.
Oh, yes.
And when do you then leverage and harness all that information? And when do you come out with it and use that momentum to take your project and really give it the oomph that a small company could never do it?
Yeah, and you know, one example of that, and obviously one of the main points of being at a big company is to take advantage of the power that a big company brings, right? It's, you know, it's sort of like if you have a tank, you want to figure out how to use a tank appropriately. I'm sure there's some non-military metaphor, but I can't come up. If you have an 18-wheeler, it's good to figure out doing more than dropping your kids off at school, even though that may be what you need to do here and now. But as your kids get older, you know, you might want to start a logistics business with them and start taking advantage of that 18-wheeler that you have. I wonder if there's a 16-wheeler. But, you know, for example, one of the things is that if you're doing the PRing and marketing, when you're starting out, you probably don't want to hook into the giant PR and external comms machine for doing things. So you want to instead probably depend a lot on what you would, Barton, call guerrilla marketing, which means you dress up in a gorilla suit and hand bananas out to people with your logo on it. So the other thing, see that guy is guerrilla marketing right there. But no, really, like, especially when you're doing an open source thing, and this is one of the aspects of doing things in, we'll call it an open process, but an open source process, is, I don't know if a lot of people appreciate that a lot of your early on marketing and ecosystem building and partnering building is built into the open source dynamics, which is great. So you can start taking advantage of that, but you want to be aware of how you're using that to market your product. And then eventually, as you get closer to that logistics company that we all dream of starting with our children, you do want to hook into the PR machine and the marketing machine and start to really get in part of the process, if you will. And I had an example of that in the presentation where an old, I don't know, acquaintance of mine that I did a podcast with some time ago was in a room somewhere in London, and with some of our field guys were out talking about cloud and virtualization, and they were going over some of our other products, our other fine products that we have. But he wrote me an email in the meeting. It's like, why aren't they talking about Crowbar and talking about this stuff? And so, you know, those are instances where certainly at the point we are with Crowbar now, right, and we do this, you know, you do need to engage with the big machine to start amping up selling. But you don't want to do that too early, or else your tiny little tricycle, you know, gets run over by the 18-wheeler. No good.
And on that note, Cote, a pleasure as always.
Sure.